Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, everyone. I hope you're all well, inshallah. Today I'm joined by Sister Fahima once again. Assalamu alaikum, sister. Inshallah, you're well also. How are you feeling? You feeling better? We were just talking before we came on that you were sick for a while.
Alaikum salam. Yeah, I'm still getting over a really, really bad cold. And excuse me if I do try and cough. I'm trying to stop. I've got some cough sweets, but still. No, I'm a lot better. Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah, that's good. You don't realize how important your health is when you don't have it.
Yeah.
Just so the viewers know, we were supposed to do this stream the first time around, but other things came up online that we decided to cover instead. So it's good to finally get round to covering your journey and your activism and your work. I was saying to you before, I've never really gotten to know you as a person before. So it would be good to do that today. And you have a really interesting story, personally, professionally, and spiritually. So let's start with an introduction into you as a person. Could you please share about your upbringing in South Africa, what the Muslim community is like there, and how you ended up in London as a child?
Yeah, I was born and raised in South Africa, born during the apartheid. And even though I was very young when we left, I do remember a strong sense of community. The Muslim community is very incredible. It's very vibrant, diverse, and deeply rooted in social justice due to the struggles they faced historically. And my family moved to London when I was a child, seeking better opportunities, like many immigrants. But, the values of unity and resilience and faith stayed with me, and they shaped who I am today. My family are not like extremely strict, but we do have lots of Muslim and religious practices that we have. And in South Africa, coming from the Hanafi sect, we did actually do a lot of recognition and acknowledgement of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. And we actually practiced a lot of the things that when I was surprised coming into London, which I only saw in the Shia community, but we did it as Sunnis in South Africa. So I guess that would be the next question, but that's kind of how it kind of started in me sort of like learning more about the different perspectives within Islam.
And what was it like coming over here in terms of for your family? Was your family, they'd lived in South Africa for quite a long time? Was all your family from there?
Yeah, my great grandparents were born there. We've been there since the sort of mid 1800s. So
Wow.
we've been, there for many, many generations. I consider myself South African more than anything else. We do have Afghani roots, but majority of the Muslims in South Africa, especially from Cape Town, they have Indonesian and Malaysian roots.
Right.
So there's quite a mix. There are some Asians as well. But yeah, when we left, it was a big shift because it was just my parents and my sister, myself.
Right.
And then a few cousins came years later. But still, my majority of my relatives and family are still in South Africa, and I have one in Australia. But my mum goes there every year. She's actually leaving next week to go visit again, because all of our relatives and family is still there.
Okay, that's amazing. I mean, I have a tremendous amount of respect for South Africa, both historically with what the late great Nelson Mandela achieved over there, and then even in the present day, for how they've stood alongside Palestine, supporting them and the apartheid they're going through, just like South Africa did. It's an amazing thing that they're doing, and it seems like such a great nation. I've never actually been. It's somewhere that I would love to go and to visit. It's very interesting to hear about Islam over there as well, and your experiences as a Muslim. It's in such a historically significant place. You must have really got a culture shock when you came to London, which you said that you did a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, my dad traveled the world before we actually came here. So he's very much like worldly and, different to the rest of my family. And when he wanted us to sort of have a future, especially just for my sister and I, and he kind of looked ahead and saw that, it wasn't going to be the opportunities that he'd want for us. So we did come here. And in South Africa, even though it's apartheid and it is definitely segregation and unfairness and a bit of oppression, but for the Muslim community on the whole, we do have a very strong, tight-knit kind of community. I would say similar to the Jews in a way. And, we did have lots of mosques and sort of, say in politics as well.
Mm.
And even during the apartheid, and the Muslims generally are the ones that had businesses. And yes, there's so obviously a difference of demographic and social economic background. But in my family, we did have, a huge house and helpers and a
Yeah.
swimming pool. So to come here, it was a really, really great shift. And you think, oh, well, the UK, the West, London. And when people ask me, oh, you come from Africa, they're like, don't think of it as being modern and developed, but South Africa itself is absolutely amazing, beautiful. The houses, the roads. Yes, you get certain areas. Now it's become a lot more dangerous, but we have exceptional sort of standards, and it's very much similar to the US in that sense, in developing sort of terms. So yeah, I thought I was coming to something similar or better, but I was like really shocked by the size of the houses were so small, and everything was grey and dull, and everything was so like, minuscule compared to over there, because land is obviously, so large and vast.
Yeah, I can imagine it could have been a massive culture shock, and I think a lot of people do think the UK is some sort of, like, beacon of light and hope, and it can be in some ways. I can understand why parents would bring their children here to better their
Yes,
future, but there's definitely negatives and positives to every place.
100%, 100%.
You did touch on it briefly before, but we're going to move on to quite a tricky subject next, which is you changing from Sunni to Shia. And there's a big divide due to, the negative history between these two sects. I'm Sunni. I don't think I could ever change that. But I know plenty of Shia sisters who attend the Islamic mother and toddler classes that I go to, and we all get along well. And honestly, I've been going to these classes for years, didn't even know that they were Shia, because it's obviously not
Yeah.
something you discuss, and I wouldn't have even known their husbands were Shia also. It's not something that is discussed. And I can understand why some Sunnis have certain views about Shias and vice versa. And I believe, and truly I believe, if you follow the 5 pillars of Islam, don't commit any shirk, pray Salah, and follow the Quran, then you're a Muslim. But it's interesting to know I've never known someone to go from Sunni to Shia. So how and why did you change from Sunni to Shia, and how did your family react to you doing that?
Well, South Africa is very strongly Sunni. And but our practice over there, like I mentioned before, the recognition of Imam Hussein alayhi salam was very, very strong. And we did like majalis, like how they would do it here amongst only the Shia and not the Sunni. So I was quite surprised about that. And I always ever knew as well the same way, like the Shias are not Muslim, they don't believe, and this, the extreme. And I think whether it's Sunni or Shia, you always get the extremes. So it wasn't an overnight decision. I began exploring different perspectives of Islam with an open heart and mind when I was a teenager. My parents, like I said, they're not strict, very liberal, but we were very much with our routine of salah, of prayer, of the Qur'an, and, dressing modestly as best we can. But again, there was never enforcement or strictness, and especially not being in South Africa and having a community even more open to a certain extent. But I found a deep spiritual connection in the Shia theology and practice. And only then, when I was actually trying to, as a teenager, wanting to learn more about my faith, and I don't know why, but I just wanted to question more, where most people, coming into a sort of Western liberal sort of society, because my parents were quite strong with regards to their faith and holding on to it, I wanted to question as to what they were saying. So I met a girl in college who was Shia, and I said, well, that's not even proper Muslim. And she started laughing, and she gave me loads of books. Once I started reading, that was it for me. I read mainly, books about Karbala, and the stories just made such a sort of more sense to me, and it answered more of the questions that I had and gave me a sense of closeness, especially to our Prophet's family, peace be upon him, and his family as well. And you can imagine, my family had mixed reactions. My immediate family, they just knew by then I was wearing hijab, which none of my family do. My mom doesn't even up till now. I was more religious. It's not because of the Shia, it's because I just went into Islam deeper, because there are, from all sort of sect, if you go into it, that's how you feel. Obviously, some are supportive, others struggled with the change, especially going back to South Africa and telling them, just questioning me, my aunts, and, worried and whatever. And I could tell they were holding back, but, they were respectful, and I respect that. And I always believe that faith is a journey and it must be rooted in sincerity, not convenience. So I genuinely feel it. And I do actually even understand why people are against it, because there are also extremes. And I
Mm-hmm.
don't follow those ways and those practices of, especially like when it comes to cursing, the sort of like companions and things like that. And even a lot of Shia scholars, they don't recommend that. And I personally was very fortunate because in my journey, I actually sat with scholars. I've had shows with them. I've sat with different scholars and I've read also on my own. So I've been in it much more deeper than a lot of people think. So I'm not just like, blindly brainwashed or anything like that. I really have taken into the steps. And even now I'm raising my children that way. I still respect and I still follow some of the Sunni ways, but theologically, jurisprudence and practice, yes, it comes mainly from that. But again, I think there's more similarities than you realize. Obviously, the end stories of our Prophet's family, peace be upon them, is obviously a difference. And that's the major thing, and the slight practices as well. But when people say that the Shia are not Muslim, they have absolutely no clue of Islam. They really don't. And I have respect for both. I can go to both. And for me, like I said, it just gave me much more clarity into my faith. And right now, I don't even like to sort of associate in either sort of terminology of Shia and Sunni. I just call myself a Sunni. A Muslim.
Mm-hmm.
And if it follows suit that I am following the Ja'fari school of thought, then that's what you make of it. If you call me a Shia, but actually, when I speak, when I practice, when I do things, I would say it's in line with majority of the foundations and the principles of Islam in both sects. So, and when people come at me for that, it really does not bother me because my journey is my own,
Yeah.
and it's just real sort of a shame when people are sort of disregarding people just for extreme views, because that's what I'm fighting here as a Muslim from the West that are doing it to us. And then when you see our own communities doing it with each other, that really gets my back up as well, because they should be much more understanding and acceptance and tolerance as well between us.
Yeah. I agree, and I've actually met one of my friends from these classes that I go to. She's actually Sunni and her husband is Shia, and they've got a daughter, and they're going to have another one. And I was saying to her, like, how are you bringing your child up then? Because you're two parents. She was like, well, he's actually following more my practices now, and we don't actually talk about Sunni Shia. We don't have that. Like you said, we're all Muslim in our house. We don't, before in the times of the Prophet, there was no Sunni, there was no Shia, there was no schools of thought. Everybody was just Muslim, and that's what we are bringing our children up as, and that's how we see ourselves as. There's no different sects, and like you said, the same thing. There's no need for anyone to put anyone down because they're a different school of thought or a different sect, because at the end of the day we are all Muslim. And I said at the beginning, it's a touchy subject to speak about, because on both sides there are very polarizing views on each other.
Yeah.
But I've heard of certain types of Shias that do walk a tightrope of maybe going out of the fold of Islam, but the same could be said about certain types of Sunni Muslims as well, like you said. Yeah, there's extremes on both sides. And obviously, I'm not trying to take away from anyone who may hold grievances between these sects, due to negative experiences or history. Again, happens on both sides. But like I said, I'm a person that likes to move forward and likes to have unity and bringing people together. And even between Sunnis, we're not all the same in our traditions, and the same goes for Shias amongst themselves. So once again, like I said, if you follow the 5 pillars of Islam, you acknowledge Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one and only God, and Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, is his final messenger, then you're a Muslim, and that's all that matters, right?
Absolutely. I mean, I can argue for various things for the Shia and the Sunni as well. But again, that's another story for another time. But again, it's with respect, and we all have our perspective. Sorry, I am having a sweet only because of my cough. Excuse me. But at the end of the day, our values are the same. I think the foundation's the same. And if people do want to have those extreme views, then, for them, I feel it's a shame that it's like that. And I understand couples don't talk about it, but in my case, I wouldn't be with someone unless I felt strongly, because I'm, someone who doesn't just do things flimsy. And if I follow something, then I would choose a husband that was the same, and I would want my children to be the same. there's no such thing as like compromise in that sense. I think that if you are sort of like not practicing much or as strong in your faith, that's when it becomes where it's, oh, it doesn't matter. To a certain extent, it does. There are some various differences in practices and beliefs and jurisprudence and fiqh and, you know, some of the rulings, of course. So for me, I'm very solid, and I'm not ashamed of that at all. But like, you know, even amongst the Sunnis, there's various schools of thoughts and they do things differently. And that's also fine. And at the end of the day, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to judge us, because I'm still moving towards that. And just because I acknowledge what Karbala is, doesn't mean that I put that at the forefront. But actually, when you think about the Middle East and what's happening now and about oppression and standing against oppression, that is the story of Karbala, Imam Hussein alayhi salam, Imam Ali alayhi salam. And we don't put that above our Prophet, peace be upon him, and his family. We just understand and recognize these stories. And then when it comes to Karbala, it's just not recognized and given the respect that I think it needs, because that's why we are in these situations, especially in the Middle East and in Palestine, because it's a direct reflection of how we need to be and how we need to stand up, even as a minority, even against, you know, great sort of superpowers and things like that. So for me, I see the correlation even up till today.
Yeah. And it's definitely about, you know, like you said, we're all one ummah and we're all fighting the same fight. And if we're fighting amongst each other, then that's why. And that is one thing that I think as Muslims maybe need to work on, is loyalty and coming together, rather than fighting with each other and picking apart each other's views and thoughts and opinions. But yeah, it's a very interesting subject. I do have a super chat here. I'll just shout out quickly before we move on. Coffee Lover said, finally made it to another stream. Hope all is well. Thank you for joining. Enjoy your coffee. Thank you for coming on. Let's move on to your work in media. So I've seen you featured in quite a few viral clips recently. Debates and discussions about Islam with non-Muslims. What made you choose media and journalism as a career, and how do you navigate that as a Muslim woman? When you started, did you wear the hijab? Because that would be quite interesting as well to know.
I wore the hijab when I was 18, so just before I finished college.
Yeah.
And I didn't even wait till I finished college. I did it while I was there, where all my friends saw me. So it's been many years, and for me, that's just my identity now anyways. So I didn't choose journalism or media. I think it kind of chose me. At the very beginning, I was at Islamic channels. I've been to almost every one. And I had my own show from there, just passionate about storytelling and giving a voice to the unheard. And as a Muslim woman, I knew there was a void in the media space where narratives of often misrepresentation or silence. And, you know, more importantly, because I went through my own journey of divorce and I started studying and training again, that I was helping others. So for me, it's a meaning behind it. It's not just because I want to go out there and just be seen and heard. I actually want to help people. And that's the main, you know, the actual foundation of it all, because I had something that I was learning and I wanted to share that information. And that's basically it. It's transforming mindsets, helping them through the most challenging and vulnerable times. And my case was very still nothing compared to the cases that I see today, but learning the actual psychology techniques and behaviors of human mind, that kind of just got me so engrossed in studying and learning and training. And then it just kind of grew. And when it came to mainstream, because I was on different channels and I was seen, and then ended up even on British Muslim TV for 5 years with my own show. And before that with scholars and literally tackling every single, you know, topic you can, and the most taboo ones as well that most people won't want to talk about, even intimacy and, you know, polygamy, and when it came to even LGBTQ in the Muslim community, like things that people were so scared to talk about. And I was like, no, I'm going to do this. I'm going to speak about it. And it needs to be said, because I had clients with these issues, and I still have clients and see people. When I speak, it's never really just from my own experience. Majority of the time, it's because I have seen like thousands and thousands of clients come to me from across the globe, literally, and I've helped them through their journey, whether it's for business, relationships, and just general well-being, mental health, depression, anything like that, anxiety, fear, confidence, you name it. I've actually learned the strategies and techniques so that I can transform that. And that's where it started, really. And I don't know, I think, I hold firm to my values. It's not easy navigating it. I remind myself that that representation matters. And if I don't show up in these places, then someone else will tell me, their story, and it will not always be truthful. So I have that confidence naturally, and I am quite fiery and passionate. And I guess sometimes it works, and some channels have actually cancelled me for it. And that was actually the Islamic channels, not the ones that I've been on recently, but they don't even exist anymore. So I feel like even though I'm speaking now on the mainstream, I feel that they still value me more than my own community at times, which is a shame, because I've seen the politics even in our own communities. And that's why, no one can actually tell me, oh, why you're here, why you're there, why you're going into those kind of platforms. Is because actually, in my own community, I should be given more of a space and more of a support, but I don't really see that. And I'm one of the few that are actually standing up and speaking, and I don't get the actual space and support.
I mean, alhamdulillah, sister, you have a lot of courage for stepping into these hostile media environments, and especially on your own, and having to talk to a panel of naysayers, which usually includes, presenters as well as the guests. And you've been on channels like GB News and Talk TV, which are generally quite prejudicial against Islam, and definitely have an anti-Muslim bias in their reporting. And credit to you, you hold your own and you remain calm whilst you get your point across, despite, there has been times that I've seen you've faced quite ignorant and intolerant viewpoints, and I don't know how you do it. What's been the most frustrating interview on the right-wing news platforms you're quite often on, and why?
Well, I guess it's more about the fact that, there's a reinforced narrative about, Muslims and how we are viewed, and the same topics come on over and over again. And I feel there is definitely a spotlight and obsession with Islam. And I think if you look at history and you understand that there needs to be, the baddie, there needs to be someone to blame. And I guess it's our turn to really take the hit on that. And it's a very easy target. That's what I see us as a target. Because when I actually speak and make sense, and when I look at the comments, and believe me, it is not easy for everyone to take. I don't go in there with any planning and preparation. They just give me a topic or a title or an article. Sometimes I don't know who I'm sitting against. It's politicians. They're experienced. They're much older. They sit in parliament themselves, even who I'm sitting with. And they know, that's their clique, that's their group. And I'm literally going into an entire panel of, probably middle-aged white men as well, with opposing views. But there's still respect professionally, and I'm treated very respectfully. But at the same time, those views are very strong. And I'm literally tackling it on my own, and with few seconds to think, because I don't know what they're going to question, which angle they're going to come at. And people just say, oh, this, that, and the other, but they don't realize the pressure and the kind of, research I have to do in a very short space of time, because I'm literally only called sometimes within a few hours. And in that time, I'm getting ready, finishing my day job, and then going there in the evening. There's not much time to even do much. So I'm constantly always researching, and, and it's any topic, literally, even if it's Islamic. I have to know the laws. I have to know, the legal system. I have to know, so many things that comes with it. So it's not easy to navigate that. And then obviously you've got people coming at you with different angles. So people don't realize. And I am sitting there and I'm trying to, again, change mindsets, even if half of them or majority of them don't. I know there's a few that do understand. And the ones that don't, you're never going to change. So that's not my aim, but I think we do need to have representation and speak. And the fact that I'm given that space, I do respect them for giving me that voice and space, even if people say oh, they're just, maybe, not the right platform to be on. But like I said, I've been on those other platforms, and then my voice was, again, sort of cancelled. So at least here, it's a much bigger platform with a much, much more sort of reach. And if people are thinking like this, not just in the UK, but outside, and they're actually seeing someone who is Muslim, who is wearing hijab, especially because there's no one else wearing hijab that I know that's on mainstream in the UK right now, speaking and talking like me and tackling almost any topic and any subject. Most people will only be really comfortable in their own space. I veered outside my own niche. I've never really had a niche, but, with like relationships and just coaching, but going even into politics and going into, other social issues, which is completely outside my realm. But I'll do the research and I'll literally give it my all. And majority of the time, I think I do come out looking, a lot better than most of the panels out there, because I do know what I'm talking about and I do my research and I only speak what I really believe in and what's really passionate. And it's not just about, because I'm Muslim. I am telling the truth. I am saying it as it is. There are so much similarities between the West, between Islam and Christianity. And sometimes, we just need to work on that so that they can see us for who we really are. And if they want to paint a picture that's not correct, that's definitely something I'm not going to stand for. So I do actually set it straight.
Yeah, and I think that's important because shows like this, like we said, they're anti-Muslim. There's quite an anti-Muslim sentiment, and if you have someone that is a Muslim representing us in such a way, it definitely shows people that, well, this is what Muslims are like, and this is what, instead of just letting them have their own views and run away and follow what these people are saying, it's someone that's actually representing us. And once again, well done to you for not buckling under pressure and getting your point across in a calm and collected manner. And, essentially you're defending Islam against prejudicial individuals who either don't know any better or others who are openly Islamophobic, and you are defending us. And that's such an important place to be. And I think if you have a platform, any type of platform, that is the one main thing that you should be doing as a Muslim, is defending Islam and Muslims in general.
Well, you know what?
Shifting to a topic that is more personal to you.
Yeah, but just before we move on, I just want to say the backlash that I do get, it is not easy for anyone to handle. I get the most hate, even with the most views. And it can be something where a lot of people will not be able to handle. So that's another added pressure that I get from my own Muslim community, thinking I don't wear hijab properly, which I'm not saying that I do, but I'm, striving towards it. And at the same time, that's what they concentrate on more than the fact that I'm actually doing work that most Muslim men cannot even really match, and sit there and have the guts to do it with my identity and face and everything shown. And the hate that comes out of it, it's not just about the misrepresentation. Then you really see people for who they really are and what they're thinking and how necessary it is to actually shape the narrative.
And it is important amongst Muslims as well, like you said. And it's sad that we have Muslims that, like I said before, they pick on each other, pick on little things that are not important, instead of looking at what the person is doing and what they're trying to do for Islam and what they're trying to do for Muslims. And like I said, it's important for us to all be united and to show loyalty towards each other. And if you have something to say to someone, that's why we have private messages. You have ways that you can get around that. You don't need to say it in such a public way and show publicly to Islamophobes and such that we are not all united, because that is what they see and they laugh at that and they do enjoy that a lot. But shifting to a topic that is more personal to you, you've said before on this show and previously that you've gone through a divorce and come out the other end stronger, wiser, and a more humble person, alhamdulillah. And in the West, there is an increased number of cases where more and more sisters are going through this, especially now. I think in my generation and our generation, that's definitely happening. And with any relationship breakdown, it's unfair to blame one gender completely. But at the same time, we can acknowledge that there will be cases where that may be applicable. But most of the time, I say if a marriage breaks down, it's because of two people that it just didn't work, right? But regardless of the reason why it happened, it's about both parties learning from it, not making the same mistakes in the future, both in terms of their conduct in a relationship, as well as choosing a more compatible spouse. So from your experience, what advice can you give to sisters, especially that are going through a divorce and moving on with life and trying to move on in a positive direction afterwards?
My guidance is only from my own experience with this and the people that I see that have actually evolved positively from a breakdown in marriage, and that is to heal intentionally. So lean into your faith, seek support, don't rush the process. And remember that you're not defined by your marital status, because I think with the Muslims as well, there's a lot of pressure, even though it's half your faith, but at the same time, it doesn't actually define you fully. And focus on rediscovering your purpose and passion and your peace. And I really do believe that when one chapter ends, it's the beginning of something much more powerful, and I'm living proof of that.
Mm-hmm.
May not be in a marriage now, but I have so much more meaning and purpose in my life, and I've transformed so many people, other people's lives, which is so fulfilling and powerful. And we are meant to be much more, to do much more as women, Muslim women, then even if we are the nurturers and the sort of like, the mothers of the household, that the caretakers and caregivers, we can do so much more. And I have found my meaning and purpose. And it's all about working within yourself. Like you said, it doesn't matter who and what happened for that reason, for that breakdown in marriage. But when you start looking in, even if you think that other person was like 99% wrong, that even that 1% of change that you need to make within, honestly, when you concentrate on yourself, you focus on yourself and you give yourself meaning, you just become so much more powerful. And not because you're, better or more or anything. Again, it has to be more connection with your creator and understand your meaning and purpose. And I think when we start working on ourselves, honestly, that is the real discovery. And you will see women transform their lives completely, even not just for their next relationship, but more importantly, for mothers, the ones that have had children, because I don't want this to be like every other statistic. And I've broken those boundaries in many ways. Firstly, being divorced and not breaking. Secondly, most importantly for me, is my two sons who are now very young teenagers, and they were only 5 and 7 when I was divorced, so they were very young. And then my learning and my training, I sort of developed that not just for myself, but more importantly to transform them and their mindset. And honestly, they are my motivation. They are everything for me that has kept me going and given me even more reason to push forward. When a lot of people look at it as a burden, for me it was the biggest blessing and gift. And for anyone, unless it's like extreme toxic and abuse, if you leave your children, you leave your family, I don't care if you see them once a week, it's not enough. When you choose them first, you see blessings and you see the connection that you build between you and them. And I tell you, that is the most successful thing that you can have. And you see that they are your return on investment, because they are a gift at the end of the day. And it's a complete responsibility for a parent to put them first. And for me to put them first was to deal with myself and to heal myself and to build myself. And that all came from self-development. And whenever I learned anything, it wasn't completely new. It just was terminology that I could transfer. But because I was already into my faith, it just made it much more powerful that it was succinct, because I didn't look at Islam from a psychological perspective or a scientific perspective. But when I started learning, it was all there. Whatever we learn now, it's already there. We just need to translate it in those terms. And now when my children are growing up and people are like, oh, teenagers are like this and that, they're not in that direction, because they look at faith completely different, because I have taught them differently. And, that for me is my biggest success. And yeah, of course, they can probably, stumble and fall at certain points, and I'm there to catch them and support them. But they've got a solid foundation because I've got that foundation. So you know what? That's what it comes down to. Literally, I think anyone that has a breakdown, yes, it's painful. And no doubt it can feel like your whole world is falling apart, because I felt that too. It wasn't my choice. I had a good marriage. There wasn't anything wrong. Unfortunately, with my ex, he stepped out of the marital contract. And, at the end of the day, even if I was to blame, but I'm not to blame for the fact that certain people do certain things which is unethical, immoral, and things that, you can't come back from in my situation. So I do have a very respectful relationship with him because of my children. And they do see him and he's part of their lives. And I always make sure that he has his rights, they have their right towards him, and he has his rights towards them. So again, if you follow the Islamic sort of way, there is no issue, even in these kind of circumstances. You're not weaponizing them, you're not taking away his rights, you're not, putting unnecessary extra burden on what is already a difficult situation. And it's not easy. There were times that I used to imagine the worst things only just to get myself through the day, but I wouldn't act on it.
Yeah.
So you're human, but you go past that through the development and you realize, what, if certain people are half pint, they're half pint. You can't expect more from them, and you just got to deal with it. And I have to be the best version of myself because my 2 children are now looking at me and they turn towards me 100%. And even if their father's there, I'm the main primary, carer and caregiver, in a sense that I take care of their well-being, and that's the most important thing you can do. And I think that if you concentrate on that, then you work on yourself more.
I love that. And I love that you said, I think as mothers, sometimes when we have children, we put ourselves back and we put the children first. And I mean, I know as a mother of young kids that you lose yourself completely, right? You lose all your purpose. Some mothers stop working, some mothers stop doing things that they were passionate about. Sometimes you don't eat, your children eat before you eat, right? And you're tired, and you do put yourself to the back burner, even as a married woman, right? Whether you're going through a divorce or you're not going through a divorce. I like what you said, because I think it can apply to all women, right? Whether you're even a mother or not, whether you're thinking about getting into marriage, is to really know yourself, be strong in yourself, have a purpose, and build your confidence in your self-esteem to a point where you don't need people to give you that validation. You don't need things to give you that validation, because you're strong in who you are, and whatever then you tackle after that will only be easier, rather than going into it with your eyes closed.
Exactly. And the best way to teach your children, they don't listen to you, they watch you, they mimic you. So if you want the best for them, you have to be that first. That's the best way. And we know that in psychology. So for me, if I'm going to keep working on myself, that's literally the best lesson for my children to watch. And they've seen my struggle, they've seen my challenges, they know everything about everything. And they've watched me rise and grow in the most difficult moments when it was just the 3 of us. Yes, I do have family support, but when it's us just on our own, the moments when they're ill, the times when it's at night, the times when we're out on our own, people think that, divorce is okay as long as I come and see them. They don't realize those moments in between that the children need you. That's what really matters. That's what creates connection and bond. And if you're not there to actually even, make up for those gaps that you miss, you lost them completely. So as far as I'm concerned, as soon as you become a parent, they are your first and foremost priority. And I've always done that. And every decision I've made and every choice was thinking about them first and put them first. And subhanAllah, that is blessing. That is blessing.
Yeah, subhanAllah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward you for your patience and the sacrifices that you've made for your children.
It is a sacrifice. Yes, it is a sacrifice.
Definitely.
I haven't got married as well, because at the end of the day, I know that there's a time and it might come, and if it does, again, it has to be them first.
Yeah, and that's a tricky thing as well. I mean, you're a single mother, and we've spoken about, how hard you've worked to be successful in your career, and, adding another person into that can sometimes be something that people are worried about. Sometimes people don't get divorced because they're worried about being alone for the rest of their life. Some people get divorced and think, I don't ever want to be with anyone ever again. So it's another tricky situation. And again, you have to put your children first, like you've just said. And alhamdulillah,
no, honestly, when I put my children first, it doesn't mean I hold myself back, because I have so much blind faith as well. I just know when the right person comes at the right time, it wouldn't matter, because I'm so strong in the way I believe in. That process is just a matter of time. If it comes, and if it doesn't, it's fine. I already had a marriage, and I married my best friend. And in my perspective, it was good. And if they didn't feel like that, then that's not my problem. And obviously the way I've grown and the way the world sees me now, my reputation stands strong. So at the end of the day, I do feel that you need to just think about, your own purpose, like you said, and don't worry. If you got faith, you can't worry. You just got to trust. That's tawakkul. And I really do believe in that. And I've seen miracles happen without anything. Even me being on mainstream, like, who am I? Even now, who am I? There's our celebrities, there are journalists that have studied, there are politicians that I'm sitting with, and the most difficult of characters as well. And I'm there, the one that's, battling, where most people, they've never had that opportunity and they never even will. And even if they had it, maybe a 5 minute, I've been doing this now on mainstream for 3 years nonstop. 3 years. And tomorrow it can all go away. And that's absolutely fine. But what I've created literally out of nothing, because I was absolutely a housewife. And when I got divorced, I literally built from scratch.
Wow.
Literally from scratch. With 2 young children on my own, not network, not any support, not like, people or family or money or connections, on my own. That's the difference, because I just trusted.
Alhamdulillah, you seem to have balanced both these roles really well. And you seem to, I mean, honestly, I don't know how you do it. I don't know how you do all of it and how you do it all yourself. And it's not an easy responsibility for a woman, especially a Muslim woman to have, where not only have you got the burden of, well, it's not really a burden, but you're raising your children on your own, and then you're also having the responsibility to provide financially for yourself and for them, and it can be quite difficult to manage, I can imagine. How do you balance it, with your career and parenthood, working as a single Muslim mother? What advice again would you give to other mothers that maybe are at that beginning stage where they don't know what to do? They don't have finances, they've never worked a job, or they don't know how to go back to work. They're now divorced with their children. What advice would you give to them?
Like I said, there's been much more difficult situations than mine, and I'm still blessed. Their father gives, my children everything that they need as well and require. He does play a role. And even though I take care of their well-being, he does play a big role. And he is not a bad person. Things happen and people make mistakes, but at the same time, he's definitely someone that I'm not got regret of who I chose to marry in the first place. It's just that, sometimes those kind of like situations are not forever, and that's fine. I've come to deal and accept that. But at the same time, the balance is not always there. You have to understand that sometimes it's family more, sometimes it's children more, sometimes it's actually my work more. But I'm very disciplined. I'm very militant. I've always been like that.
I can imagine.
Yeah, if anything comes last minute, I'm really prepared. My house is on point. My car's on point. My kids are on point in every single sense. If you see them and the way they dress, the way they look, even me, I take care of myself. You wouldn't think that I was cooking all day or cleaning all day or whatever it was. I do manage quite well than most people. And I've kind of just always wanted to just, not a perfectionist by far. Absolutely not. But I just managed to do certain things because I just got a different mindset. It's like, I don't want to clean and cook, but you know what? To get to the next stage, I got to get it over and done with, kind of thing. So I get the menial things done. I organize myself, and then I look forward to what I really want to, enjoy, like either sitting in a studio, debating. That's my passion. My day job, helping people, working within the Ministry of Justice and coaching and things like that. So I've got amazing opportunities. And more importantly, I do speak and spend a lot of time with my sons. And they're at a stage right now that we speak a lot, we talk a lot. So when we don't even, we just get along, because at the end of the day, we understand how things work. But I have a routine, and I'm very disciplined. And you have to have a routine, and you have to be disciplined. That is part of Islam. If I have 5 salahs to do, right, I have to make sure I shower. I have to make sure I'm up in a certain time. I have to make sure I'm asleep at a certain time. I wake up for Fajr. I read my Qur'an every day. I read Surah Yasin every day. I'm on time for everything. And if I go anywhere, I try and plan it around it. Or I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to miss it. I'll come back and pray. That's how I think. That's how I work. When you've got those things, Islam gives you that already. You've got certain things you have to follow, you have to do. So I fit it around that. And subhanAllah, even if I think I'm running late, I'm like, oh, I won't be able to pray first. But I'm like, somehow the time just opens up for you because my intention's there for that first. So there's no such thing. And I'm doing 10 times more than I did before without an extra person in the house. And I manage. So it's not like, I've got 27 hours. It's just the way in which you create that space for yourself, and it opens up for you because my intention is there first. And now my sons pray without me having to tell them and remind them. And they're so young, and they follow me, they watch me, and they see even the benefits of it. They see it as protection. Again, they see it as power. It gives me power. That's how I feel. I can go and sit in that studio without much research, and I just, say a little prayer. And honestly, that helps. And only someone who's a believer that will understand that. And only someone who understands miracles and the power of our faith will actually know that. And yeah, it's not always strong, but the more I trust in it and have my intuition, honestly, it really works. And with all the techniques that I have learned and knowing human mind and behavior alongside with faith, and I coach a lot of people that have absolutely no faith, completely opposite to me, and I can still help them. So it literally, everything comes down to me when it comes to it. Even though I may not look the most religious person, I practice. And if you practice the most basic things, the rest is so easy.
It's not always about how you look, it's how you feel and how you act. Like you said, that's the most important thing. And again, Sister, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward you for your efforts bringing up your kids as Muslims and then defending Islam by educating others through your work. And like you said, it's learning by example. That's how kids learn, right? So that's the main thing. If you're not being what you want them to be, then you can't expect them to be any better, right? You got to do what you want.
Mistakes, and you have to make mistakes and own it. I am so far from where I want to be, even in my faith. So if I'm speaking, it's not to say that I'm saying, oh, I'm have it all. Absolutely not. We need to also own the fact that, Islam is there for us to strive. When people even, I've had shows when I've had so many reverts that have come on and they're so much pressured by the Muslim community to do it in a certain way. And I'm like, we've had a lifetime and being born Muslims and we still can't get it right. And then you put that pressure on someone that's newly there and you want them to be absolutely perfect. It's the same with a Muslim as well. You don't know where they come from, where their experience is, what's their story, how and why they are not wearing the hijab, why they've taken it off. I've had friends that take it off. I'm still their friend.
Yeah.
Most of my family don't wear it. And at the same time, but they've got morals, they've got ethics, they've got, certain ways of believing and the values. And yeah, that may come. But, when you listen to the stories of Islam, the riwayats, and how, certain people, they may not have even come across looking in the abaya and the thobe and things like that, but they had the heart. And I think we're lacking the heart nowadays, because then, your voice will be different. When I get, the hate, and I'm like, gosh, where does that come from? I don't actually take it in. I'm just thinking, what actually happened to you to think like that and be like that? I actually pity people that come and hate on me because it's just so poisonous to yourself. That's what it is. And if you understand how the mind and body works and how much that actually affects you, you're actually creating a virus in your body with all of that hate. People get offended. Muslims get offended by me because, oh, I wear makeup and, oh, I'm not wearing the hijab properly. I'm like, excuse me? Seriously, you're offended by me? Literally, I've had other women say that, loads of people, and I've had more backlash really from my own community in the past. That's why handling, sort of the far right, extreme or whatever it is, nothing. Because when you get it from your own, that's heartbreaking more than anything. That's heartbreaking because they should be the ones that's really understanding and they're not.
Yeah. And I think everybody's journey is unique to them and separate to them, and you should be concerned about your own journey. And sometimes people that do have all these, comments about how people are or their conduct or what they look like. And obviously everybody can have an opinion, that's fair enough, but it's the way you say that opinion. And it's also about, sometimes it just shows more about yourself than it does about what you're saying about the other person. But speaking of which, an online place right now can be quite sinister at times, especially for Muslims. I mean, I experienced it myself where anti-Muslim trolls will even resort to committing, cyber crimes against me and then boast it amongst themselves whilst hiding behind anonymous profiles. And to be honest, it doesn't affect me as much because I don't really look into it as much, and I don't, like you said, it doesn't change my life, right? It's just a person behind a screen. And to be completely fair, at times the conduct of Muslims can also be quite questionable online too, like you were just saying. So I think that generally that's usually blown out of proportion by Islam haters. They like to get their clicks. And like I said previously, as soon as they see Muslims fighting amongst each other, and we've spoken about this last time when we were on the stream, they enjoy that because they get to make videos about it and then they get their views up. So with the vast amount of Islamophobia and controversy online, what do you think is the future for Muslim media in regards to the dawah scene and just media in general?
I just think that, we just need to do our bit. We need to constantly work on ourselves. When there's opportunities, don't shy away from it, even if it's a platform that is completely opposing. As long as you're not turning and speaking their rhetoric and, giving their propaganda, and you give them the space to speak what you need to say, then you never know, that one person can make a difference. And there's been a lot of even people that I've met that have been even far right, sat in the studio with me and said, I was far right, I was homeless. Now I'm helping people. Now I think and act differently. So I don't lose hope on anybody. I don't actually label someone and judge them for life, because that's what it's all about. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has written, 10 times more about forgiveness than he has about punishment, then we ourselves as humans need to be kinder and more compassionate and empathetic towards each other. So I feel that even if I'm sitting in these really sort of difficult situations and platforms, it's still a very, very open space to make a difference and change. And even to our own communities, to not shy away and not scare away from having those difficult, uncomfortable conversations. Because I know most humans, they cannot do it even with their families. That's why even relationships break. I also have to change my delivery because I come across too strong and, I'm very passionate. So I've had to learn and change my ways as well. But I really do feel that the scene out there, it's more about not having the right intention. So even when it comes to the Muslims that are putting themselves out there, don't just do it because you know it's going to get the clicks. I don't have any much followers on my page because I don't do what other people do. Or maybe I don't understand it, whatever. But it's not, for me, it's just a record of what I've done. Yeah, I might go viral on the other mainstream pages and I'll get like, however many 100,000 views, whatever. But if I really want to concentrate on being an influencer, it's more about being it for myself first and actually doing the work. And I concentrate on actually working at the grassroots, making a difference there. Most of my clients privately, even that I still coach, it's all through recommendation. It's not like an advert. It's not because they've seen me on a click or a page. It's literally because I know the work that I do, and the work that I do actually makes a difference. Again, it really comes down to individual sort of, spaces of how you want to show up. Because again, I'm judged every step of the way, you're judged every step of the way. And if we are just concentrating on being judged ourselves, and that's all I'm focused on, then I don't see a problem in how we show up in any space. And you don't have to be a public speaker, but even amongst your family, your community, your society, whatever it may be, you'll be the best version for that time if you just show up the best for yourself, knowing that you're the one that's being judged constantly.
Yeah. And I think we just have to be resilient, right? It doesn't matter what anyone thinks about or says about you, or the lies they spread about Islam or Muslims in general. If we continue putting content out there that only defends, not only defends but promotes our religion with the aim of combating, negative stereotypes, while at the same time educating people, then who cares about the negative weirdos that are obsessing over it, or the negative comments that you get? As long as, like you said, as long as your intention is good, as long as our intention is pure, I believe that will result in positive outcomes. It can only be positive from there.
Well, if you look at our prophets, imams, and things like that, they all had struggle. They all had, so much going. So, and they, were the top of, performing and sort of practicing, and they went through it. So why shouldn't we? We have to live the same and walk the same walk and just use their examples to keep striving. It's not just resilience, like I said, it's trust. Trust that, you're fighting for something, just like how when you are against the oppressor, you have to be at the right side of history and doing what's, just and fair. And that for me is the most important value. And if you are working on those ways, and it's not about you, I'm not here about me. It's about the message that I have to give. That's why I don't care if I'm on live TV. I don't care, of the anxiety that most people feel, or, that kind of, it doesn't even cross my mind. I need to go out there and I'm giving a message. I'm interested in, setting things straight, representing properly, showing and giving a narrative that I believe that needs to be heard. Even if you don't want to hear it, I'm giving the space and I'm going to do it. So I don't get that fear and sort of that, that sort of people that will feel like, oh, I can't sit and speak because they're more worried about how they're going to come across, when actually it's more about what I need to say. And if you know what you need to say, you've worked on yourself, you are confident to say and live out your faith in so many various ways. And this is dawah in itself, is the fact that you are sending out the right message as best you can. And that for me is the best way forward, is to actually put people in their places when they are incorrect, especially about our faith.
Yeah, definitely. I do agree with you in that one. And I appreciate you so much for being so honest and for being so open and for defending Islam, like I've said to you so many times. Thank you so much for joining me today. I know it took us a little while to get here, but I'm so glad that we did. It's been really good to get to know you better. And you got through it. You got through
I
it.
got through it without coughing right until the end.
Yeah, but it's been really good to get to know you better, and it's always a pleasure speaking to you. I always enjoy our streams together.
My
Thank
pleasure,
you so much
honestly.
for
Thank you so much for the work that you do, because you're providing the space. Don't think that, at the end of the day, the work that you do, and I really do acknowledge and I respect you as well for all the work that you put out. So thank you so much for all your hard work. Really appreciate the time as well.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you for coming on. And thank you for everyone for watching. Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Alaikum salam.